everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Rams Review Podcast. It's Corey along with you today. But alas, I am not alone. We have a very special guest. It's another Rams Review Meets episode. And today we're meeting former Derby County defender and Welsh international, Lewin Nyatanga. Lewin, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good, Corey. How are you?
I'm living the dream, Lewin. Living the dream every single day. Supporting Derby County, never dull. But thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us this evening. Because I've been interesting in preparing for this because, Lewin, you've had a very interesting career. You've been a lot of places, you've seen a lot of things. And then you've gone into your post-football life very early on. And that's kind of where I want to start. So you retire age 29.
Yeah.
That was a few years ago now, but not so many few years where it's like in the distant past. You're not an old man. You're only a couple years older than me. But in terms of footballing terms, we're both ancient. Let's just admit it. Lewin Nyatanga post-football, what are you up to and what's your life like?
So at the moment, I am doing a master's degree in physiotherapy. So I have probably about a year to go. So in the thick of it at the moment. But yeah, that's my next career focus that will hopefully keep me occupied for the next few years.
Why physiotherapy? What got you? What was the interest in that? Was it because of, you saw players like Giles Barnes and Miles Addison always in the treatment room, and you were hanging out with them, and you were like, "Hey, this is a good gig." What kind of sparked the interest of that?
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, I think I've always been interested in the human body, movement. Obviously, for me, sport was a big part of my life. Ironically, however, being in football made me not want to be a physiotherapist. So I had a few opportunities to study when I was playing, and I chose another path for my undergrad. Um, but coming out of football and seeing the other opportunities and the other kind of specialities that physiotherapy has, it kind of made me think, oh, actually, there is options for me outside of football to do this. So I was a little bit more intrigued and interested. Not to say that I would definitely never go back into football. Like, you never say never, but at the back then when I was playing, I just thought, this type of physiotherapy isn't maybe for me. But what I've seen since leaving, there's other options regarding physio that I'm more interested in at the moment.
What put you off about it?
If I'm brutally honest, I feel the way the backroom staff are treated, I don't think they're given the respect that they probably deserve, especially when you get into elite sports. Most of the people working in elite sports are very good. There's so many CVs that are put on the table when there is a job offer. Can you imagine a job advert for Derby County first team physiotherapist? You can just imagine how many people would apply for that. So the person that gets that job is very good at what they do. And for me, seeing the day-to-day job of a physiotherapist in a football team, I just felt like, wow, you're worth more. You should have more respect. And they seem slightly disposable and slightly at the whim of the manager. Whatever they wanted, it was almost like jump how high. So, I'm not saying there's physiotherapists that have fantastic experiences, because I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's some physiotherapists in certain teams that absolutely love what they do, amazing manager, look after them, treat them with loads of respect, they get very well compensated, etc. But from what I saw, I thought, it's not necessarily all it seems to be from the outside. But I think that's a lot of things with football, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
We saw that a couple of years ago with Jose Mourinho and the physio when he had the I forget her name, but it was the lady physio, and she ran on to, I think it was to help Eden Hazard or something like that, who had like a head injury, and there was a big bust up, if you remember that. He like sacked her, and she went on, and he was trying to hold her back, and she's trying to do the best for the player. And I've always felt it, it's kind of a strange, awkward position to be in, especially when you're in a football club, because let's say you're the physio for Derby, you've got to have Lewin Nyatanga play at the weekend because we need to win games, but I also have to make sure that he's fit to play, and not necessarily for that he has, life after football, that he's not walking around with, half a leg or something, or, what I mean? Or, after concussion protocols and things like that, sometimes you have to balance it out. And I can see where sometimes they're put in that awkward position of like, well, can he play? Yeah, he can play. Like he's not dead, like he can stand out there and he can still do something. Like, he might not have an eyeball tomorrow. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. We'll worry about that tomorrow. And, and then, things go wrong. Well, we could win the game if, Lewin Nyatanga was playing, but physio said he wasn't fit. And then it puts the physio in the firing line and things like that. So that's interesting. Talk to me about the other side of the game, Lewin, that you just hinted to there. What other things do us fans not see that that you would be comfortable with sharing? That sometimes, because I mean, we look at it, right? Footballers are fit, attractive, rich young men who get paid a decent wage. I mean, whether you're in League Two, you're still getting paid a decent wage to play football. I think that's pretty safe to say. You're keeping fit. You've got seemingly, you've got the cars, you've got the wags, you've got the house. Seemingly everything's going great and everything like that, right? That's the perception from the outside. Footballers have no problems. But then I've heard other stories, like, you hinted at the physios there. We spoke to Miles Addison, about some of the troubles he had with physios. And sometimes people aren't, behind the curtain, people don't treat you very well. What's it kind of like behind the curtain that, that you were hinting at there?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So I think it's really important to say that every story, every industry, there is a balance, and there's positive aspects and there's negative. I think we could sit here and speak for hours about all the positive aspects of football. You mentioned some of them just then, and no doubt it's a very privileged position to be in. But there is a narrative that there is no negative. And I think that is a narrative that has been continued in the media. Youngsters who want to be professional footballers, they just see it as this dreamland, this paradise. And of course, there are many positives. But I just think, people don't realize how ruthless of a profession it is. And, you know, I consider myself a Derby County fan. I can't say that I follow football now, but for me, growing up in Derby, I had the Derby County wallpaper, I had the Derby County bedspread, I had all the home and away tops with Francesco Baiano on my back and Chris Powell, and the goalie top was Mark Poom. Like, I was a fan. I was there watching every game, season ticket. You know, I was behind the goal when Robbie van der Laan scored at baseball ground to get us promoted to the Premier League. I was literally behind that post. So I've been on the side of the fan thinking, oh my goodness, this is just amazing. But, but then having the privilege to be a player and go behind the curtain as you were, like, there are aspects of it that aren't a paradise. End of the day, you know, it's a very high pressured profession, and a very, like I said, ruthless one that's not very forgiving. If you don't perform, you're gone. There's other people that are in. You were saying about head injuries and injuries. They don't care. If you're paid to perform. If you're injured, then we'll get somebody else. Or if you can play on an injury and the team wins, but long term that causes you problems, that's not something that they think about. So I think in professional sport, especially football, there's a lot of, pressure, a lot of anxiety, a lot of like mental health issues that I just don't think are spoken about because of the environment. It's very alpha, very macho. You can't show weakness. So everyone is like, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine, I'm good. But I've been in a professional setup since I was 7 years old. I was in the academy at Derby at 7, and I played professionally for 12 years. And I've been in changing rooms from international, Premier League, Championship, League One. Like, I've seen the spectrum, and there's different challenges at different levels. But They're all challenges. And I think it's easy to sit back and think it's easy, or if anyone tells you a story of their experience, you can't feel that, can you? You know, someone can tell you, oh, this happened, and you're like, okay, whatever. And normally with football, it's, oh, yeah, but you get paid X amount a week, so just get on with it. And I appreciate that thought process more after leaving football, because I do see more now and appreciate more that people work very hard for not a lot, and they have stresses and struggles in their life, and they think, oh my goodness, if I was on that much a week, then everything's sorted. But it's always a thing that if money's the biggest stress in your life, you think when you have money, everything will be good. Well, no, just money won't be the stress, but there'll be something else. And I'm sure you know, in most jobs that are high paid, there's a reason why you're high paid, because it's very competitive, So I mean, personally, for me, in my career, I've always been of the mindset that it is what it is. Like, it came with its, don't know, scars. It came with its negatives, but it also came with so many positives. So I kind of left going, I accept it. I'm not bitter towards it. It, I could have walked away at any point. I chose to stay as long as I did, and when I chose to leave, I had my reasons. But I actually think it would help the up and coming generation of footballers just to understand the realities. And it's not to say you shouldn't do it. It's not to say you shouldn't be a professional footballer. But I kind of, for me as well, wish that when I was younger, people were a little bit more honest of the whole 360 reality of being a footballer, not just all the positive bits.
Because I mean, I would assume, if you were a teenager and let's say, you know, I wouldn't say it's different for you because you came to the Derby Academy and whatever, but let's say, you were in an academy and you were away from your parents for the first time and you're, 16, 17, 18 years old. That's a massive life change. You're very young on the scale of, a human being and their life scale. That's pretty young, right? We know that brains don't develop until they're like 25 fully. And you go to the manager and you go, I'm kind of homesick. I'm missing mom and dad. I miss my brother and sister. I miss my girlfriend, whatever. And they go, yeah, just shut up. You're on 15,000 a week. That's your problem. You're on 10,000 a week. That's the thing. And yeah, like you said there, that sounds a great deal. $10,000, $15,000. That's a lot of money. That's life-changing money per week. But then nobody ever sees the flip side of the fact that you might be in a hotel room. You might be missing that interpersonal connection. You might be missing these relationships that make you a human being that we all have. If I take anybody and I don't see my parents for a period of time, or I don't see my friends for a period of time, I'm going to feel sad and everything like that. But then you're expected as a footballer, I guess, to just get on with it because you're in this privileged position. And, you can't really switch off, I would assume, because like you said, it's highly competitive. So if I have a bad day of training, that could be the day that's a make or break, whether I start the next game or the next 3 or 4 games, or, you can't really shut off. You have to go home, watch Coronation Street, and then go, I got to get back in the same mindset for tomorrow to go and get after it, because tomorrow could be the day that makes or breaks it. And I guess that's very mentally taxing for somebody week after week after week to continue have to do that, not only every session, but year after year after year, continuing to do that. It must consume your life in a way.
Oh, definitely. It's all consuming. I can't explain to you like how much it just consumes every living moment. But I think as well, and I've said this many times in different interviews, it's not from a point of you should feel sorry for a footballer. No, because again, there's people, everyone has stresses. People have stresses about mortgage, people have stresses about work deadlines and bosses being horrible. Like everybody has stresses. It's just the dismissal of a professional athlete's struggles that I find interesting. It's not a competition. It's not to say, oh, a footballer goes through more struggles than a school teacher or a policeman. It's not about comparing. It's just people telling their story and saying, oh, actually, there was parts of it that were really challenging and actually not very nice. And people going, okay, that's interesting to learn your story, as opposed to shut up because you are earning this much, so you can't say anything negative. And I think that's that is definitely the narrative. But of course, football is a bubble, and when you're in it, you don't really realize you're in a bubble. But how can you? I sometimes think there's a lot of anger directed towards footballers. But for me, I was in the academy, like I said, from 7 years old. You don't know anything else. You leave school and you're in full time in the football environment. So of course you're in a bubble, and you're young. Goodness me, I look back. I made it into the first team at 17. Like sometimes I look back and I don't understand how I did it. At 17, I would sometimes think people that listen to this, think of nephews or maybe you have children that are 17, they're probably just about to go to college. Don't know anything, do they? They're kids. And you put them on Pride Park in front of 30,000 people on a weekly basis and tell them you got to perform and you got to deal with all that pressure and be completely seamless because any mistake is just there's no hiding place, is there? 30,000 people giving you, their pretty harsh
And they assume
comments
because you
on.
step out on the pitch, you can deal with it. And you might be a very mild mannered, soft spoken, uh, sensitive 17-year-old boy. And they're like, well, he's thrown out there in men's football. He can handle the abuse. And I've paid my money in the stands and he misplayed a pass, so he can go and do one and whatever. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
they just expect that, don't they? They just expect that you can go out and do it. And people do, you did it, but it must be, again, sometimes people don't look at through that lens of like, yeah, that could be my kid. That could be my grandkid. That could be my brother. That could be me, like 17 years old.
definitely.
I wasn't playing in front of Pride Park. I was playing like 9 hours of PlayStation in my underpants, like it's different when you look at it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not to say that people shouldn't be allowed to say what they want. They pay their money, they can. They have every right to. It is again just to be aware if people are interested. If people aren't interested, then it's like, don't listen to the podcast, don't listen to players' interviews. But if you want the full story and not just all like the Instagram highlights, I think there's more depth in that, especially nowadays. Let's get the full 360 because that's more real and authentic than I could tell you all my highlights from my career and sound great, or I can be like, yeah, this was good, but also this was really challenging. And I think that's a more honest account. And again, I think it will help the next generation of players to go, okay, I'm more prepared for it because so and so spoke about it, so I'm not so shocked when it happens because I was made aware of it before.
Let's talk about a few of your career highlights. Talk me through making your debut for Derby County at 17 years old.
So the first one in a competitive game was in the League Cup against Grimsby, home match. I think we lost 1-0 actually. But I remember I played left back and I think I played quite well. I think I got man of the match. Although I always look back and I think, when you play your debut and you don't do really bad, I almost think it's a given that you get man of the match. It's like, well done, you didn't mess up, you know. But yeah, I think when you're in it, you you haven't got time to stop and reflect because there's a game in 3 days, there's a game in 5 days, and if you don't play well in that next game, then that game before doesn't matter. My debut for Wales at the time, 17, youngest ever player at the time. That was Wednesday night. We played Paraguay at the Millennium Stadium. We won 1-0. On Saturday, I'm back to Derby. We're playing Watford away. And I remember walking in the building on Friday morning for training at Derby, and the first thing the manager said to me was like, "Forget about Wednesday. That's done. You got to perform tomorrow." And you're like, "Okay, fair enough."
Like setting the tone, like no uncertain terms, like,
Yeah,
bringing you
and it
back
is
down to
what.
earth real quick. Not, how was the experience, or, did you see any Paraguayans that might be good to sign or anything like that? It's just like, yeah, that was fine. Now it's time to get back to work because you've missed a couple of days of training or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and that is reality, But it's these highlights in your career, things maybe you've worked years for. Maybe you have a glass of Diet Coke or something in the hotel lobby with your family after the game, and then you're in bed, and then you in the car Thursday morning driving back to Derby, and you've got the game. Because if you don't play well on Saturday, you're out the team, and then all the that's all out the window. So
Did you keep
I'm
your
sure again in other professions it's similar. You present, you win a sales pitch, whatever, and then your focus is on the next sales pitch. So again, like I keep saying, it's not. I'm very aware it's not something that's just in football, and it's no one else understands how it is. Of course, there's other jobs, but just to give the example from a football perspective, this is how as most players do feel. I think if you dig deeper under the ego and the bravado of everything's fine, I think a lot of players, especially if you've had a long career, will be honest and say, yeah, there's definitely dark times, there's definitely amazing times, there's definitely bits I hated, there's definitely bits I loved. Um, so yeah, that's always my thing, just to be. Now I've left, I just be more honest about how I felt because it's almost like I don't care now. I don't have to, when you're playing, you
play
kind
the
of
game?
can't. Yeah, you have to play the game where, you know, again, like I said, I don't have any bad feelings towards anyone. I'm very grateful for the opportunities I had, but did I enjoy the experience? Probably not. There's a reason I retired at 29. It's not because I thought, oh, I love this so much. I just can't do any more years.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's an interesting one.
Did you keep your debut shirt for Wales, or did you exchange it with a Paraguayan player?
I think I kept it, but I don't have any of my shirts. I think my dad has them.
Fair
I
enough.
really should. I always think about it a lot. I really should, I don't know, frame them or, I probably maybe will frame one of them. But yeah, for all the shirts I've got, I don't have any of them. I think my dad keeps most of them, and it's kind of sad because again, that 7-year old at the baseball ground watching Robbie van der Laan score would think, oh my goodness, how many? If I could play one time for Derby, that'd be amazing. To then finish your career and want to draw a line under it and not really want to think about it again is a stark contrast. And I think even for me, I would be intrigued to be like, how did that happen? How did we get to that point? So yeah.
Walk me through. So you played over half the games in your debut season, and then the next season you go out on loan, which my assumption is somewhat of a shock. I would assume Lewin Nyatanga at 17, 18 years old, coming off a pretty decent season where he made a bunch of appearances, thought he might be in the first team setup for the previous year. That's traditionally how, the building blocks kind of go. You do well, you get a bit more game time, and then whatever. How difficult was for you to adjust from playing half the games at Derby to being completely out of the club on loan?
I think at the time my mindset was just keep moving, be like water. Just I don't know. I didn't really. I think I tried to put a positive spin on it, and my positive spin was that I was playing in the same league and I was playing games. So for me, the clubs I went on loan to were playing in a championship. Derby were in the championship, and I'd rather play for these teams and get competitive games and play in the reserves for Derby. So yeah, I was quite positive when I look back. All the ups and downs, I was just very positive, and I just kind of felt that keep going, just keep moving forward, no matter which direct. Like you might have to turn left a little bit, but just keep going, and things will work out. Which in ways they kind of always did. But yeah, I didn't really think about it much until later on, people would speak to me and they say, "Do you think being sent out on all those loans when you were younger hindered you?" And and I think now, I think in some ways I do actually think they did when I look back, but then in other ways, by the time I was 19, I played, I don't know, like 100 league games. So depends which way you look at it. I think long-term development maybe kind of suffered potentially, but then, like I said, mix that in with the fact that at 19 I had actual first team experience and was, you know, kind of my CV was relatively established in terms of someone trusting that I can play at that level. So yeah, I guess again, like I said before, it's how you look at it. you could look at it negatively or you could look at it positively. So it's kind of just a choice you have.
Let's look at the Premier League season because Lewin Nyatanga becomes a Premier League footballer. You score a Premier League goal. Not many people have done that. And you do end up going back out on loan. Might have been a good thing because that season, I'm sure you're well aware. I think everybody listening is probably well aware. Season kind of didn't go to plan
Yeah.
at all, remotely, even close to it. Did you get a sense when you came on and played against Portsmouth, you scored the goal? Did you get a sense of kind of like where this was going? Like what was the sense in the camp? Because I think it was January. It was January when you played because you were recalled. What was the mood in the dressing room like? I know they brought in some strange players. They brought in Laurent Robert. They tried to be like, let's just buy all these players and maybe that'll help. Like we'll just throw
Yeah.
on something on the wall, something will stick eventually, and we'll be okay. Like, and I've heard stories about how Laurent Robert was not interested, how he was literally just showed up. I think Miles Addison said he idolized him and he just showed up and he just did not care. What was the mood in the dressing room? Because you kind of come into that situation. Everyone's kind of beat down. They kind of know they're going down. They're on a sinking ship. What was it like for you to walk into that dressing room? What were kind of some of the things that were going on?
Yeah, obviously definitely low mood when you've won one game in how many months. It's not going to be a happy place when you walk in. But I think the biggest thing I would take away from that season, I think this is a something I find interesting in sports. I really do. Derby that year, we were a victim of our own success. We overachieved the year before. We weren't the third best team in that league. We beat West Brom in that final and did not deserve to. They were better than us. They outpassed us and we scored on the counter attack. And we were just so defensively sound that we won another 1-0. And goodness me, that season we must have won a lot of 1-0 games. So we essentially just went up too soon. The squad wasn't ready to go up. It didn't have the strength and depth. So I'm not too surprised that that happened. But again, because in sports everything's relative, it's like seen as this big embarrassment, and the lowest ever tally in the Premier League, and everyone's rubbish and etc. But I'm thinking, yeah, but we got promoted from the Championship. Is it better to stay in the Championship and finish ninth every season? I just think it's interesting. People that win League Two can walk around with more swagger than people that are the worst team in the Premier League. But do you know what I mean? We're the worst team in the top league, and you're the best team in the fourth league. So we're, I don't know. I find it weird, and I've had people comment on it. Since I've finished playing, like, oh, did you play in that season? And then they think it's funny, and I'm like, we got to the Premier League. That's amazing. Yeah, we weren't ready and we weren't good enough. And that's the best league in the world and it's pretty ruthless. But like, let's stop and think we actually got there because I mean, you know more than me. Have we got there since?
No.
Exactly. So it's seen as this massive negative thing and this big embarrassment. But if we look at it just brutally honestly, we have not got back there since. So that team, arguably, has been the best Derby team we've had since what 1999 with Jim Smith.
Yeah, because it competed at the highest level.
Exactly. Yes, fell short, but in the last 20 years, that team that everyone wants to talk so negatively about and make fun of is the best team, arguably, that Derby have had in the last 20 years. But people don't think about it. If you take a step back, people will be like, oh, yeah, that's actually kind of true. Or people will say, no, that's not true. They were rubbish. But you get what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they got the furthest. Yes, they got the furthest and then tripped on their face and looked a bit stupid, but they got the furthest. Where, I don't know, maybe you'd prefer to have be in the playoffs and do really well and win loads of games and just miss out on promotion and then talk about how good the team was because didn't they do amazing and they were one game away and I don't know, but that team went one more game. So
It's like
it's an
the
interesting
same
one for
instance,
me. And
would
again,
you
as a
rather
player, I think maybe because I was in that environment a bit, and you hear comments of people that don't play football or fans, and I'm like, we live in a weird society sometimes that people wait for you to fail. It doesn't matter how far you go, they wait for you to fail, and it's almost better to succeed at a lower end. For example, if this year Derby County won League One, the players would be walking around town with their chest out, and everybody would be like, "Oh yeah, they're champions! Like they're
Third division
amazing."
though.
Yeah, but that team would arguably lose to the team that finished last in the Premier League. If we're looking at levels
Yeah,
of football, but
right.
people
Yeah.
don't look at it like that. So yeah,
It's one of those things.
interesting.
It's like, would you rather go to a World Cup and lose all three games 3-0, or would you rather be a team that didn't go to the World Cup? And you can sit there and be like, well, we were better than them. Yeah, but you didn't get to the World Cup, did you?
Yeah, it's like
That's
yeah,
the thing,
100%. It's almost like, oh, in the World Cup group stage, oh, you lost 7-0 to Argentina. Oh, it's so embarrassing. It's like, yeah, in the World Cup group
And
stage.
you weren't at the World Cup. So
Yeah, you
yeah,
exactly like
there's
you weren't at the
it's that kind of thing. Yeah. Would you
yeah,
rather be
like
competing in it or not? It's an interesting dynamic. And Lewin, I wanted to get a little bit more into your career, and I'm sure I would really love the opportunity to have a part two of this episode with you, because I'm finding this very insightful, and I want to be very respectful of your time. But some of the things you've touched on real quick is just, but we have a few minutes left in this one. At what point did you seem like you've done a lot of introspection. You seem like you've done a lot of thought about who you are as a person and your post footballing life, something probably you didn't get to do earlier on. If you could go back and talk to 17-year-old Lewin Nyatanga, who's either broken through or on the verge of breaking through for Derby and Wales, what would you tell him?
I think that's a great question, and it's so hard because I could say, oh, I would tell him don't take it so seriously. But maybe if I didn't take it as seriously as I did, I wouldn't have got as far, even though it came at like a bit of a mental cost because it was a bit consuming. Um, would I tell him everything I know about the human body, in
Yeah,
terms of to be the best athlete you can be, to recover the best you can be? Because what I know now is just there's so much knowledge. I think, oh man, if I knew that when I was 18, 19, what I understand now about strength training, recovery, food, I would have just been such a bad athlete. And I think that was the one thing that held me back. I wasn't athletic. And, you know, when you go to those levels of the Premier League, you have to be athletic. I think as a footballer, I'm not saying I was amazing, but I think, I was a good enough footballer to play at those high levels. But athletically, I've played with and against those players, and I just can't quite match. And at that elite level, 1% is massive. Like if you're a yard slower than everyone or 2 yards slower, it changes everything. So yeah, maybe I'd give him some insights to try and get a little bit more athletic. That's probably the main thing. And everything else is hard, isn't it? Because you have to have lived it. My personality now and how I see things, just from maturity, you know, I would be able to deal with football a little bit better. Like maybe, but then almost what I know now would maybe be worse because then you're a bit naive to it all and you just getting on with it. But maybe if I went back now knowing what I know, I'd overthink things even more and know what's coming and know all the pitfalls. So yeah, I think that's a good question, but I have no idea really.
what have you learned about yourself since retiring through doing introspection and looking back at everything, and obviously being a little bit more mature and whatnot? What have you learned about yourself?
I think the biggest thing for me is like that acceptance of yourself. I think with football, I always had to be someone I wasn't. And for years, that's a hard place to be, to have to every day go. And to be honest, like, I'm sure lots of people have to do this. So again, I always mention that I'm aware this is not just a football thing, but every day to have to go and be in an environment you don't necessarily feel that you fit in, and to be someone that you're not, that's not you deep down, is quite tiring. And when they talk about flow state, some people, that's their natural environment. It's easy for them. Where somebody that it's not, it's that they're having to give a lot of energy. So I don't know. Maybe the analogy of someone who loves running and finds running just so energizing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I go for 10K runs every morning," and then someone else who has to do that finds it very draining. So yeah, in terms of just what I've found about myself, I don't know, just it's more just accepting what was already there, where before it was kind of like a trying to change who you are. And I think you can't really do that at your core. I think everyone is who they are. And then you realize that actually there's nothing wrong with you, just that environment maybe wasn't right. Because then I found other environments where my personality and the way I am is perfect, but it just maybe wasn't the footballing one. But that's hard because it's put on a pedestal. So you're almost like you want to try and fit yourself into this because this is the pinnacle of life. It seems for like a lot of people, doesn't it? So.
I appreciate that, Lewin. That's good honesty, and I appreciate that. And I hope we can continue our chat in a part two.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's when you've got two young children, and you're studying, it's always hard to fit things in. But yeah, it was good to chat. So hopefully we can figure a time to do it again, and we can have a longer talk next time as well.
Most definitely. That's
Yeah.
all we've got time for today, Rams fans. So the only thing left to say is up the Rams.